I would like to take a second just to briefly introduce Tom. For those of you who don't know Tom, which would be surprising, Tom is the president and founder of Edge Capital. It's a boutique investment banking firm based over on the east side of Cleveland. And since he founded it in 2000, he's completed more than 275 domestic and international middle market M&A transactions. And Tom has 25 years of experience in transactions, including an active and dynamic role in family business, which we will talk about today. He's also an inactive CPA and maintains all of his securities licenses so that he can transact business. Welcome, Tom. Good to see you.
Eric, Thank you for having me. Good to see familiar faces in the audience.
There's a lot of them as I continue to and let people in. Before we start, you and I had a prep call just to see what we might talk about, and you introduced the book, The Road Less Stupid, which I actually am listening to on audio. Did you read it or did you listen to it?
3/4 of the way through. I'm a listen to.
So he's a trip, right? I mean, for those of you, and I don't want to turn this into a book club, but I might add that component to our discussion. But this book is fantastic. It really has helped me rethink decision making and how to sit down and just think about things and corporate culture and all those types of things. We could easily have a conversation for an hour about the book. So I wanted to thank you for introducing me to that, and the author who reads the book. I've enjoyed him as much as the book itself. So, we've got 3 things we want to focus on today, and I wanted to start the conversation off. You had said something in our conversation that I thought was really important, and you said something along the lines of, the business of business is people, right? And the people who focused on improving themselves, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but I wanted to get the conversation rolling by bringing it up. The people that focused on improving themselves, focused on their businesses, those are the people that we should be focusing on as employers and as leaders. What did you mean by that?
It's a great question. And I'll tell you, the hardest part of being an investment banker is you fill yourself with really, really interesting people. You get a chance to meet them, engage with them, meet their families. It's very easy to become very self-absorbed. And the profession is littered with lots of people that will tell you how important they are. I'm humbled to be here. I share my stories very infrequently with people. But the biggest part of the journey, in my mind, is the business of businesses people. It's about establishing empathy and rapport and relationship with your employees, your coworkers, your clients. And if you care, and if you engage in a meaningful dialogue, you have a relationship that's beyond an employer-employee relationship. And investment banking, like accounting and legal, is a service business. And that's my view of it. And if you accumulate enough really interesting people, I see Dale Mesnick on the audience list here, and he's a past CFO for a client that we sold. And they become friends, they become relationships. And I think that is the essence of all of our journeys that we have, in this brief time that we're relevant in the world of business and the brief time that we are on this earth, is to make really meaningful relationships with people and do your best to serve. And I was fortunate that my father had taught me that early on in his business, and it became a pervading concept for how I approach life and people.
Now, I know that you have recently been working on expanding your capacity. You've brought some very talented people on from across the country. As you focus on those special people that you bring on board, that's also got to conflict with the fact that there's a real, I don't like the word labor shortage, but it's tough to find good people. How do you go about finding those folks that are fit into a culture and are worthy of being treated as being the business of business?
The single most important thing you have in a service business is the quality of people that you have serving your clients. So finding people that not only have the technical competence, fit into your culture, see the way of the world through you. I often refer to EdgePoint as a 60-hour shop, not an 80-hour shop. That's countercultural for most investment banking firms where you're bred to be the 80 to 100. I have an analyst that's taking the day off today because we violated, the 80-hour plus rule. And hopefully it's balancing his world out. I'm not sure if it makes a difference at the end of the day, but to me, it feels like a promise that we've made and a relationship that we're trying to restore and maintain. And it's hard. Obviously it's a peak M&A period right now. Trying to get everything done in the time that you're allotted is really challenging.
Finding them is one thing, keeping them is another. And
Right.
Keeping them is, as I'm reading in the book, and we all knew anyway, is about culture. Describe your culture that you're working on and that you're building at EdgePoint.
Great question. The belief that I have is be real, think, wake up in the morning knowing that whatever you did the day before is in the press. And if you're proud of that, it's wonderful. If you're not, that's not acceptable. And having those real dialogues, having that transparency and accountability to each other is critical. It's critical to the success. And our business, like many of your businesses, are really hard. Quite frankly, it's very difficult to go make a market and keep confidentiality and keep emotions in check in a very emotional process. So to me, you have to make sure that everyone's engaged and excited all the time, every day. And that becomes part of the culture. And we've worked really, really hard to find the people that fit where we're trying to go, not necessarily where we've been.
You said accountability. People don't like to be held accountable in a certain circumstances, right? What's that look like in your firm?
It's a great question. First part of accountability is being clear what you need to be accountable for. So what's the important metrics? What's the important data that you want to measure and hold people accountable to? 21 plus years of doing business, I now have a few metrics that are pretty critical to us, right? Companies to market, new clients engaged, level of service. And those all become critical metrics that we track on a daily, weekly, quarterly basis. And it's really hard when you're busy to talk about the refilling of the pipeline for new opportunities that come in. But it's part of the business model. And I've got weekly meetings that occur with the leadership team. And we have conversations that go on a quarterly basis. We have a pop-up meeting every week with our team to make sure that the pulse and culture of the company is pervading through and that we're not losing anything through translation of conversations.
It must be having an effect and it must be working, because you told me you have brought on 2, 3, 4 new investment bankers, one from Dallas. They're not from Northeast Ohio. You hired them during a pandemic when business for the investment banking world was on pause. And you brought them in and you're bringing them into Cleveland, right? They're not working remotely. So you kind of doubled down. Help me with that thought process of why you did that and how you did that, and just when most didn't.
Obviously, it was because the Browns tickets that I bribed them with for this upcoming year.
This year, you might be right.
Right. So other than that small bribe, now, I mean, look, you've got to find world-class talent. We operate in 4 primary verticals: industrial, business services, consumer, and healthcare. And it requires people with domain expertise in those verticals. It requires people that understand M&A transactions and that are driven. And so, unfortunately, not all that talent resides existing here in Cleveland, Ohio. And some of the people that may be in Cleveland, Ohio with those talents may not see the world through the same lens that I do or that EdgePoint does. And you have to go out and, we're a national investment banking firm. We do work all across the country. To fulfill that, I need, the best talent that I can find. And fortunately, we've got a platform here at EdgePoint that's exciting and motivating, and we're able to attract. We brought on a gentleman from Houlihan and Lokey out of New York. We've got a gentleman from Houlihan out of Houston that's relocated to Cleveland. And frankly, they're enjoying the city and what it has to offer. There's a lot that Cleveland provides that often we forget about and don't really appreciate.
But you had to have begun this wooing period with them during COVID. Did you see that as an opportunity because some firms were downsizing during the epidemic? Did you just see an opportunity? I mean, why then?
It began several years ago. I mean, it's the realization that the world of investment banking is becoming more discerning. If you were doing upper middle market transaction, it has been vertical specific for a while. That market has changed significantly, and it's made its way down to the lower middle market, where you're receiving mandates to sell, privately held businesses based upon not only culture and fit, technical expertise, but also domain expertise. The ability to really understand how that industry works and why it works, and building relationships in that industry. It requires a different type of person. And so we began searching and hunting for the right people that fit where we wanted to go, not necessarily where we might have been. And I've been blessed with great people along the journey, really smart, really driven, wonderful friends that, may or may not want to take a ride of where we're going. And that's okay.
So would you say you're opportunistic, or you continue to look for opportunities to grow your staff?
Yeah, Eric, so you know how it works, right? Everyone's 100% convinced that they figured out the secret sauce and they know exactly where they're going, and it's right. And we all deploy capital, resources, and time towards those endeavors. And, of course I'm right. How could I be wrong, right? And then you wake up and you modify and you twist and you turn, and it just doesn't exactly go linear. But we feel like we've got a very clear pulse of where we're heading and why we're heading there. And, the key ingredient to it is people. And the culture that surrounds those people makes it all happen.
You talk about verticals, and I don't know if you can call family business a vertical, but to a certain extent, there are family businesses are unique. They've got unique issues because you've got family issues involved, and those can get complex. I don't know that everyone knows you come from a family business background, but maybe talk about that and how it maybe helped you. I don't know if specialize is the word, but you certainly have a proclivity and a specialization toward family businesses.
We spend a good portion of our time helping privately held family businesses. We enjoy that. I think there's a psychology session on why we enjoy that, but we enjoy that. I think it's one of the more complex, if you look at the spectrum of businesses that you can be part of, adding an element into an already difficult business called family makes it even more complex. And when you start talking about tens of millions of dollars of net proceeds and who gets what and what's fair and employment of competent or incompetent people, boy, you got a recipe for some pretty dynamic fireworks. And for a strange reason, we enjoy that. That's exciting. That's what we get up for every day. I had the pleasure, it was a life-defining moment for me, mostly by birth choice that I didn't choose. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My grandfather in 26 started a marine dealership that used to sell Indian motorcycles and service outboard motors. And eventually it morphed into a Chris Craft and Sea Ray and Lyman boat dealer. And my father and his twin brother, Jack, bought the business in the 60s and grew it into a meaningful Sea Ray dealership, through the 70s and 80s. And that happened to be my formative years of watching a family business that sold boats go through shortage of gas lines, where you're rationed to $10 of gas, to interest rates that go into the 18% plus category, and through family transition going from generation to generation 2 to generation 3. And yes, I will assure you that those were very, very interesting times to talk about high school and college and family. And for most family business owners, there's a very fine line between the boardroom and the kitchen table. And my family was no different. We lived and breathed the business. It was who we were. And I was fortunate in hindsight that as the business struggled, there was a luxury tax. I have a deep love for government. So just in case anyone can't pick up on the sarcasm, that's not true. They put a luxury tax in, George H. Bush, and that luxury tax wiped out a good portion of the marine dealership and the marine building marketplace. unintended consequence, but a significant impact in my world in my formative high school and college years. And so those events became the why I do what I do. I enjoy helping family businesses through complex transactions because I can picture myself sitting across the table from my father and my uncle having these dialogues saying, whoa, big cliff over there, don't go. Or holy cow, the world's ending, get out, right? And those are the kind of interactions that if you deeply enjoy serving your clients, that's what you get the chance to do. And so my family business experience is a major piece of the mission for what I'm doing here at EdgePoint.
Not every one of your bankers probably has that background or that experience. How do you share that with them? I mean, are you involved in all transactions? Are you a consultant in all transactions? How does that special spice that Tom brings, how is that seasoned amongst all your staff, be it from Dallas or be it from Honolulu?
It's a great question. It is not something that everyone really appreciates all the time, but there's a DNA of a person that has caring, has intelligence, has empathy, right? And so we have three taglines. It's empathy matters, experience matters, and results matter, right? The empathy is a characteristic that you can recruit for, hire for, promote, and it goes to the culture that we're trying to build, which is, hey, we care about you and your family. We care about our clients. Don't ever do anything that jeopardizes those, right? Put those at the forefront of that. And if you do that well, you'll make enough money in life. It'll all be good, right?
I know the answer is, all the time, but how often do you, I know you want to, but how often do you get a chance to work with the second and sometimes third generations during a transaction, helping them understand the impact, helping them understand what this all means? I mean, I know the founder or whoever's selling the business is the person you're focused on, but how often do you get involved with the family in general?
Very intimately. The second generation is usually the pivotal point of an acquisition. I had an acquisition early on in EdgePoint's career that was a fastener distribution business. Interesting dynamic. One gentleman was 65 and the other was 67. Every year they would alternate who's the CEO of the business. Mm-hmm. Somehow that was a brilliant transition plan by the founder of the business. And one was a teacher and one was a minister. So you can guess how that story played out. The second generation had morphed into two different lines of business. One wanted to do vendor managed inventory and one wanted to do pure distribution, very different risk profiles and margin profiles. And the second generation, one brother was talking about buying the other brother out when we got involved. And the second generation says, well, wait a minute. I want to run my business. They want to run their business. Can you help me figure out how to get through it? And through a series of very emotional relationship conversations, we ended up coming into a 355 tax-free spinoff as a structure that allowed both families to have the ability to sit at the table and run their respective businesses. And it was very complex, and the 65 and 67-year-old owners weren't willing to or able to have conversations to talk about the supply relationship that has to happen. And so we helped guide the second generation through a dialogue of supply relationship that allowed that breakup to create two sustainable, viable businesses. And that happens a lot. And so if you don't enjoy the difference between Gen 3 and Gen 2 and their behavior and profile, you don't respect the role of the founder and the authoritarian position that typically she has, that's really challenging. And so emotional intelligence, frankly, is far more important what we hire for than IQ. Do you understand and pick up on cues from human beings that are left as very small trails of evidence of what they're trying to get accomplished?
Yeah, I was going to ask you to define emotional intelligence because I don't know that everyone would know what it means. And you had brought that up as well. There's EQ and there's IQ. And most of the time, EQ is more important. We talk about family business, and most founders now who are baby boomers are in their 60s, late 60s. They've been through 3 once-in-a-lifetime events in the past 15, 20 years. Taxes are going up. We just got through with a pandemic and struggled through that, and hopefully made it through and are surviving and thriving now. And you talk to these folks 5 years ago and they said they'd be ready to sell in 5 years. And they probably said that 5 years prior to that. Do you think they're ready now? Do you think something's changed, or is it still the same? I don't know what to say. The same mindset, right? Well, I'm always thinking about it, but I'm never actually going to pull the trigger. Has something changed? Do you think that they finally had enough?
I don't think it's an absolute statement to that, Eric. I would tell you that after 9/11, we called it the 9/11 effect. Some people woke up and say, what am I doing this for? Why am I getting up every day, toiling, putting all the risk back on the table every day just to earn another dollar the following day? And so a lot of people left and went and did other things. They started, not-for-profits. They got involved in their religious organizations. They just retired and spent time with family. We're seeing that same effect today. There's a number of people waking up going, wow, I didn't realize I was in a risky business. Wow, I didn't realize how cool it was to spend a year with my family and actually rebuild relationships that might not have been there before as strong. And they're choosing to do different things. The nice part about a privately held business owner is they're often left with lots of choices. Often they're financially successful or well-to-do, and they realize that they have enough money. And whatever the enough money statement comes to, at the end of the day, it isn't that much money to provide yourself the freedom away from your daily job that you have. And I think a lot of owners struggle with breaking apart the concept. I have a job as the CEO of a business, and I'm the owner of a business. Those are mutually exclusive events that most owners mix together into a big pot and say it's who I am as a person. And I think 9/11, I think COVID becomes two life events that wake you up and say, why? Why am I getting up and doing this every day? Is it fun? Do I enjoy it? Who am I on the journey with? And what is the journey and what's the purpose? And so I think there's a lot of that's going on. Clearly, we're in a market right now where fear and greed are driving M&A transactions. It's a euphoria. But are you fearful that you barely made it out of COVID and I couldn't believe what a risky business? You're darn right. There's a lot of people that are having those conversations.
So in your experience, are business owners making the decision to transition or do something with their business based on business decisions or on emotional decisions?
Again, both. It depends on the person. So we had a conversation yesterday with a business owner that's in his late 50s, and he's looking at the marketplace that he's competing in, and he's going, you know what? I'm not sure that we have the team or the capability to really play in a rapidly consolidating marketplace with international competition coming in, and the players that they compete with are very well funded and have very established channels. And so they're having an honest gut check, if you will, of are they really able to and willing to win in the next round of the business environment that's going to be a little bit more challenging. And I think it's those honest dialogues and an understanding truly of where they sit, coupled into why is it a wonderful M&A marketplace? What's the multiples? Is there capital gains impacts and all of that? And so again, back to why do we bring in bankers that have domain expertise? You frankly can't provide that advice in a very honest way without understanding the market that they participate in.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I think the attendees want to hear what your perspectives are on where we've come from this past year, where we are now, and where we're going, and what you're seeing in the transaction market today. So what did you see from your business? Things, the pause button was hit, some things went through, some things didn't. Why don't you take us through just a brief little history of the past 12 months for you guys and where you think it's going to be going in the next 12? Best guess.
Yeah. No, that's fine. We were blessed with a really wonderful M&A marketplace for the last 3 to 5 years. The market was really robust in late 19, early 20. Then the world paused. From my perspective, it was an awful time to have the world pause. We had a number of deals that had gotten closed at the beginning of 20. We had a handful of deals that were supposed to close in the first quarter, second quarter, that got paused. And I analogize it to a patient where you can stop the heart for a certain period of time. If you stop the heart long enough, boy, there's going to be lots of other complications. And I was watching the marketplace very, very closely during that March, April timeframe, going, okay, I get it. We got to pause here to, keep for this health and safety, but what's going to happen to all the businesses that live and die by this? And if we lose not a month, not 2 months, but a quarter plus of financial performance, we got a bit of a 12-month wait before the economics are strong enough again to sell the businesses that we're engaged to sell. So I don't know if you know the investment banking business model, but it's a job shop, right? And so when you stop the inflow of new opportunities and you stop the closing, it gets pretty hairy. So I was very happy to see the strong push in April and May to kickstart the economy. And I think that kickstart, albeit uncomfortable, was an absolute critical success for many small businesses down the line. And I think the early PPP funding was very helpful for many of the companies we've got involved with. So all the problems of getting it deployed and all the problems and being in a political environment during the time, I thought that turned out really well. It provided for the third and fourth quarter of 2020, which was probably one of the more successful and more active M&A markets that we've experienced. That has rolled into the first quarter of 21. And as we sit here today, we were fueled by, again, the fear of capital gains rates going up. And this has been prompted by a let's call it a 12-month delay where a lot of private equity firms may have taken a conservative approach to travel, have been a little bit slower in their development activities. There's a lot of pent-up demand to deploy capital. And so as they now begin to deploy capital, they are having the ability to choose from a very, very large swath of good companies. There's a tremendous amount of demand, which is probably at least a 5-to-1 ratio of demand to sellers. And high quality sellers in this marketplace today are getting every bit of a 25% premium over whatever value would have been. And so we sit here today with abundant capital that's beginning to loosen up and clearly free. There's a lot of money that's out there. There's $3 trillion of money that's chasing deals. There's 650 plus million of pent up US based private equity money. There's 1.2 trillion or some ungodly number of money on an international basis. And between that and the mandate for growth, we're seeing a lot of people really become very aggressive in buying of businesses. And fortunately or unfortunately, the traditional markets of CDs and stocks and bonds, people are turning over to private equity, independent sponsors, search funds, family offices as a vehicle to chase yield. And all of that is fueling and driving a huge amount of demand. And for our world right now, it's actually really hard to attract people. It's really hard to process the amount of opportunity that's flowing through the M&A marketplace in general.
You got SPACs, you got family offices, you've got corporations, heck, you've even got 401ks now. They're going to be investing in private equity. And you said $3 trillion. We've
That's
already
corporate balance sheets, yeah.
Yeah. So it's even probably more than that, chasing deals in the big picture. Do you see multiples going even higher?
It's hard to believe it can.
I mean, inflation's, rearing its ugly head, for the first time in a long time. Is that going to communicate itself into the private equity world, or is it a bubble? I guess I asked you a lot there in that one question.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know. I would venture to say that there's going to be logical, rational reasons why interest rates should go higher, but there's a tremendous amount of pressure to hold interest rates constant. And again, as expansion of the debt that we have, I can't imagine what the federal government has the ability to service the debt with a higher interest rate environment. So there's a lot of conflicts that are going on there, and I don't know. With the amount of debt that we do have going through the pandemic and getting out of it, I have to imagine that taxes will increase. corporate tax rates, capital gains rates. I read an article the other day that said they don't believe the capital gains rates are going to actually get increased in 2021. Oh, that's the first time I'm beginning to see that. And, whether it's a citation of political reasons why it's not driving that, whether it's I don't believe that there's a consensus that we need it right now. And so I don't know. And most people are telling me that, hey, we think it's somewhere between 25 and 28%. We think it happens at 12/31. There's no retroactive. And they think that's something that can get passed and that would have appeal. But I don't know.
So you kind of skated around the multiple question, which is fine. I get it.
I can answer.
But how about structure, though? Do you see with what we've gone through this past year, is there a different approach to structuring deals than there was before? Or is it still just the same as pre-COVID?
So multiples are outstanding right now. Like I said, it's at least a 25% premium on most of the pitch values that we're experiencing. I would tell you that structure during COVID, I think we're post-COVID now from my intellectual perspective. I don't know if that's true. There was a lot of earnouts. There was a lot of contingent payments. There was a lot of prove it to me's, right? If you could prove to me that you could perform at this level, I'll fully pay you for the value that you once were in 19 and early 20. And that happened and worked really well. And I would guess there was a preponderance of deals that got closed with structure, right? Going forward, the biggest risk that I see are those businesses that actually have had a COVID bump. Life is a little bit better for them. And so, just an example would be someone in the recreational marketplace, right? If you sell a product or service that favors the at-home person, such as a pool or a spa or something in the home recreation marketplace, those businesses probably had every bit of a 60 to 75% bump in revenue and profits. So what do you sell on? Is it the last year? Is it the last 3 years? Is it some average? And so there's a lot of people that are shying away from businesses that have been favorably impacted by COVID and actually become more interested in those that may have not have been favorably impacted by COVID and maybe slightly hurt because they believe that there's more fair values in that space. And so there's a lot of consultation going on with sellers of businesses that have favorable impact to make sure that their expectations on value are realistic. And but they're actively chasing. We're pitching on a lot of businesses that have been favorably impacted by COVID. And that's a very active dialogue that we're having.
Good to hear about where those come out and what the decisions made. Because I'm sure those conversations are being had all around the country and all around the world. We've got some questions that I'd like to get out there.
Good.
First one is, we all see the issue of finding good workers. To what extent, Tom, will this drive motivation to make acquisition primarily for workforce of the acquired, more than in the past?
So workforce required. Make sure I understand the question, Eric.
I'm gonna buy a company strictly for their workforce.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the major buyer theses that we have right now. I don't have the talent inside my company. I don't have the expertise. It is a very common thesis that you buy a company for the talent that surrounds it, whether that's a leadership team, whether that's a knowledge or a know-how, whether it's literally just a workforce. There's lots of people that have tapped out. If we look here in the local market, there's large companies like Swagelok that made acquisitions in an outbound geography area just for resources and talent. So it's not uncommon, but it's definitely a driver.
You think more so than usual, or it's always been an underlying factor?
I think we've always had a shortage of quality talent. Today we're having a shortage of bodies and people to execute work. I think that's temporary, but I think there's a constant need for high quality leadership talents. It's the single biggest differentiator between a good company and a great company is great talent. We did a survey of 250 serial acquirers and why people get a premium value. The number one by a large margin reason was great talent. If you have a great leadership team or you have a team that you can build a business around and expand, that is a scarce commodity and people pay premiums for it.
I'm not sure you answered. Where do you see things heading through year end? What about next year? Do you see things continuing to grow, stay the same? Fourth quarter was pretty good, but so where are we going?
my vantage point is 2022 to 2025 might be one of the largest and most robust M&A marketplaces that we've seen. I think there'll be a lot of influence that dictate the actual volume. But look at the demographics associated with many privately held businesses. They're an age baby boomer group, that's now approaching that. You've got larger corporations that want to streamline, supply chains. You've got very, very motivated and attractive private equity firms that are allowing you to keep your culture, but grow. They dangle I can have you take a second bite of the apple and let me show you how smart I am process, right? And so they go through and they're buying these companies. They're acquiring, one of the businesses we just sold just made an acquisition. It was a $25 million business. I spoke with the owner yesterday. He goes, I'm going to make 2 other acquisitions and I'm going to be $65 million in revenue by the end of the year. That's a 12-month growth curve that's led and driven by a private equity firm, a bank, and a motivated leadership team that's capable of processing it. That's unique. That's a differentiated rationale for why you acquire.
My camera wants to know what impact supply chain disruptions have had on the market.
Everyone's got a little bit bigger inventory level than they once had out of fear, right? So the fear and greed, I fear that a ship in the Panama Canal turning sideways, cuts off my supply for. I have a fear that I don't have the ability to get something imported internationally for a variety of reasons. So we see inventories going higher, and therefore we see working capitals going higher. We are seeing companies that have really nice balance sheets. I've got a whole bunch of PPP money. I've got profits that favorably impacted my business, and I'm looking at acquisitions and I'm looking to redeploy aggressively coming out of COVID. I kind of sat still for a while. I've been thinking for a while, and now I'm ready to grow. So I think that's the impact on supply chains has been very, very important. It's very important to the businesses that are underlying the transactions, that you don't want a disruption of supply chain or any kind of supply relationship in the midst of a transaction.
It's becoming a shoot questions at you segment. So have you seen anything in your deals for punitive clauses and PAs for workforce leaving after a close, for example, drivers for a truck company?
I don't know how you keep people to stay employed, and I don't know how you ever make a promise as a business owner that people have to stay employed post-transaction. So no, I haven't seen that. Do I think people would ask that? Sure. Are there retention vehicles that are being put into place to keep the key talent? Yes, but I haven't seen it make its way down to drivers or line level workers. But I think those are critical elements of the business that certainly I, as a buyer, would be very interested in making sure I retain
that. Tom, in your experience, which gets a bigger valuation, C Corps or S Corps?
I don't think it impacts valuation. I think it impacts net proceeds. And depending on your ability to structure the transaction favorably, it could not matter. But I will say, broadly speaking, most sellers certainly want to be selling an S Corp or a pass-through entity to avoid double taxation.
Yeah, makes sense. Parting words of wisdom. Any other thoughts? Could be about the Browns, who cares? But anything else you want to share before we move into and you'll have an opportunity if you hang around to talk to some of these individuals personally. I'm sure people have more questions for you, and I really appreciate your time. But for the group as a whole, any parting words of wisdom? Any thoughts?
Yeah, you started with it, Eric, and I'll kind of finish with it. There's a book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And inside the book, there's a basic concept that gets repeated, which is think, right? You're looking at the names on the screen here. There's a group of very thoughtful, proven business leaders in Cleveland that we get busy. And without the ability to pause and to think, and not just think, but ask yourself the right questions. I think finding those right questions, and it gets really highlighted in that book, I think it's a really critical differentiator between, winning and losing, doing well and not doing well, and carving out time to make sure that you can do that contemplative thought. It's just, as much as it sounds soft and fluffy, it's the longer I play the game, the more I realize how critical that capability is. And most people do whatever they can not to think. They avoid it at all costs. They ask somebody who's really smart, what do you think? Right? Should I take the shot or not take the shot? And it goes on and on. And I think critical thinking in business, in M&A, in life is one of the key differentiators between really succeeding and not succeeding. And then the other one would be drive. Are you driven for a cause, a motivation, a purpose, an accomplishment, financial goals? And are you willing to do what it takes to overcome that? And I think, particularly as we talk about generational matters, I think that's probably the one biggest thing that I see as I interview a lot of young professionals coming out of college. And, some of them may not have the drive, but some do. And I think thinking and drive become the two things that I would probably leave with all of you to consider in your worlds and consider your employees that you have, how important those two attributes are.
If people are asking for the book title again, it's called The Road Less Stupid.
Right.
And was it Cunningham is the author?
Yeah, Keith Cunningham. He's got a nice Texas drawl to him. So
yeah, he does. If you're listening to the audiobook,
it's kind of funny.
He ends every chapter. He goes, here, let me give it to you on a bumper sticker. I mean, it's very direct. It's very common sense. I mean, I listen to the things he's talking about, and I'm like, well, yeah, I should be doing it. I'm not doing it, but I should be doing it. And a lot of it's just thinking about, decisions or whatever you do, and it's, everyone's going to assume the best, but what if the worst happens, and are you willing to accept, if the worst happens, and how can you deal with that? And I've already listened through it once. I'm probably going to listen through it again, and then I'll probably read through it. I'm more audio than I am. I'm a slow reader, but I can listen to the entire book a couple times driving between Amherst and downtown. But so again, thank you for that. And Tom and I are thinking about starting a book club together, so it'll be valuable. If are there any more questions? The last one from Brian was the last one I saw. Okay, well, it's 10 till, so it's about the same time we always start our breakout room sessions for the next half hour, or as long as everyone is enjoying themselves. Tom, thank you very much. You are a unique and special person. The industry as a whole is lucky to have you, and Cleveland is sure as hell lucky to have you. And please keep that company here.
Thank you.
We'll do. Dallas or New York or wherever these things go, and keep bringing good talent to Northeast Ohio.